This is a meeting of the Special Joint Committee on Georgia Revenue Structure. The purpose of the meeting today will be informational. There will not be a vote taken today. We're here to consider to substitute House Bill 386. And Co-Chairman Heath, you want to carry it from there, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. As you know, we've spent a lot of time working on this. The legislative process actually started beginning of the session last year, and so we've worked through this for quite a while now. And we feel like we're getting really close. We've got a plan to present to you for review today. And what I would like to do, one of our members, the chairman of the Rules Committee, Senator Don Balfour, a CPA, has worked very closely through this process and been rather challenging at times. He doesn't take anybody's numbers for granted. He's got to prove them a dozen different ways, and so he is very knowledgeable on this. And Senator, I'd ask you if you would to have a seat here at the witness table and present the bill to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We've been working on this bill for the last number of months to try to get it right. Let me maybe start off with the most difficult task, which is the title fee. What we will do starting in March 1st of 2013 is there will no longer be a sales tax on the sale of cars. We will go to a title fee in the first year of 6.5% for that 10-month period, 6.75% for the next year, calendar year, and 7% for the following year. That will not only be on sales of cars, the car that I buy at the car dealership or the used car I buy at the car dealership, which I pay sales tax on now, but will also be on the casual sales of automobiles as well as people moving into the state from outside of the state that have not paid that and have not paid any tax on those at all as well. The amount of money that is coming in from casual sales will help to defray the amount of monies being lost in the early years to local governments, after which we start changing what we call the splits, which is at the 7% level. Well, let's forget about at 7%, the state's getting 4%, the locals are getting 3% on all our taxes. We start moving that split to help make the locals whole, so that the more that at different points in time, maybe today it's 4% state and 3% local. It may be 4% local and 3% state. We change that over time to keep the locals whole. I see Representative Rice up there, and I feel inadequate me sitting here talking about his bill because this is more his than mine, and he's worked on this for years. So he'll correct. He's from Pennsylvania, so he'll correct me when what I get wrong later on. So we also guarantee the locals a 2% growth rate. Basically, they have about, on average, over the last 7 years or so, about $1 billion in revenue from either sales tax, a 3% sales tax on automobiles, as well as the what we refer to quite often as the birthday tax, which is another $700 million. That's about $1 billion that local governments, whether that be city, county, or school system, have been getting from this tax on cars. We guarantee them the $1 billion plus a 2% growth rate a year. On average, over the last 10 years, the growth rate has been less than 1%. In the first half of the decade, the growth rate was 1.8%. So we went back and gave a pretty good aggressive positive number so that the locals could be kept whole, and hopefully assure them that they will be whole based on this. In the bill, there's a look back after, I think, year 3 or 4, and we do a look back every single year from that point on to make sure that the numbers are adequate and the locals are making the right amount of money, and if they're not, we can change the split in the next year. So we change the split each and every year after year 3 or 4, based on if we thought the locals should get $1,100,000,000 in one of these out years, and they only get $1,080,000,000, so they're $20 million short. We figure out what the percentages would have been to get them that $20 million more dollars, and we change the splits in the next year to make sure that it makes up for them. So we look each and every year at the splits to make sure that they're made whole at the local level. That's some of the title fee, and I can go into that more or answer questions that you might have. We also, in this bill, increase the personal exemption for married filers. This saves individuals over this 3-year period $362 million for married individuals. We cap the retirement exclusion, which right now is $65,000. We cap it at $65,000, so it will not go higher than that. The film sales tax exemption, right now there's 2 things. There's a tax credit for films and movies. There's also a sales tax exemption. We get rid of the sales tax exemption, so the movies that are being made here still get the tax credit. They still get the tax credit, but they no longer get the sales tax exemption on film. There's an energy phase out, so that over the next 4 years, it's a 4-year phase in. Over the next 4 years, manufacturing will no longer pay sales tax on the manufacturing, on the energy on manufacturing. There's a very strict definition of manufacturing, but that will go away so that we get in line with most other states, and hopefully this helps our manufacturing friends. There's also in the bill a energy discretionary amount that the governor, if there's a job, if there's I'm trying to think of the right term, if there's a opportunity for a Caterpillar to move to Georgia, that's probably the best way to put it. The governor can give that energy exemption not over 4 years, but if it's regionally significant to the region, the governor can give a sales tax exemption automatically to the Caterpillar or people like that move in. So you have a 4-year phase out, but in the meantime, the governor, if there's a project of economic significance to the region, that he can give that, and that he has some discretion in that number a little bit. There's an ag exemption as well, to the tune of $42 million over the 3 years. We also have a construction material exemption, which the governor would have, so that similar to the aquarium, that's the best example I can tell you from the past. When the Marcus Foundation built the aquarium, we let him build that $300 million building sales tax free on manufacturing of the on construction equipment. Obviously, if he doesn't build the aquarium, we wouldn't get that money anyhow. And that $300 million, now $400 million aquarium is a great asset to the state of Georgia. Hopefully this helps in expanding and bringing more businesses like Caterpillar into the state of Georgia. There's a jet fuel exemption. The jet fuel exemption is due to expire on fiscal year 13, after fiscal year 13. To a great extent right now, that exemption is basically only for one company. We have changed it in 13. We've added 14 and 15, whereby every airline company will get a 1%, will pay only 3%, not 4% on the state portion. This will help, hopefully, and it's not just for Hartsfield Airport, it's for Savannah, it's for Macon, it's for all the airports. Hopefully it helps airlines, and it brings in airlines into the state, and also brings airlines in the outlying areas and not just Hartsfield. There's a portion that's always referred to as e-fairness in the bill. Under this e-fairness portion, if there's affiliate nexus, there will be a tax that will be collected by on that amount and remitted to the state over 3 years, that's $47 million. One last item before I move to the next category, you have sales tax holiday. What we've done there is we have a sales tax holiday that we've put in fiscal year 13 and fiscal year 14. For the state, well, for the individual, let me just stick with the individual a minute. At the individual level, the individuals are going to save about $66 million in fiscal year 13, according to the numbers that we see, and the individuals will save about $70 million in 14 from the sales tax holiday, which is a 2-day holiday, but for, I believe, on energy efficient equipment, it's a 3-year. It's 3 years. Excuse me, not 3 years. 3 days for them. Most other things, it's 2. I'll give you an example. In the past, sales tax holidays has had computers at $1,500. They've reduced it to $1,000. Basically for the fact is we can get computers a whole lot less expensive than we used to, and you don't need to have them at $1,500. Let me mention one other one that I skipped over, the energy phase out. When we do the energy phase out, we get rid of the energy for all 7%, not for the 4%. We get rid of the 4% for the state and the 3% for locals. The locals can then turn around and put it back on if they'd like to. So they have the option of putting their 3% back on. But when we do the energy exemption, we're getting rid of it entirely in this bill, and then we let the locals put it back on for those 3 years. I'm sure I missed out on a number of things, and I'll be corrected for doing so, but if there are questions, I'd love to answer them.
Yeah, Minority Leader Abrams has questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, starting with the title fee, the impact on newcomers, you referenced that briefly. The way I read this, if I am a military family and I've purchased a car in another state that costs $20,000, upon arrival, and I'm transferred here, upon arrival in Georgia, I would be required to pay $1,400 to register my title here. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, can you show me how this would work?
The reason that is not correct is military families do not have to retitle their cars.
Okay.
That example is absolutely 100% true if a school teacher moves here from another state. If you change your example just a little bit, if a school teacher moved here from another state and they have a $10,000 vehicle, they would have to title their car and pay on the $10,000 car $700 in a title fee. For the military example you gave me, military do not have to retitle their cars.
Okay.
There's federal law about that, and each state allows. My brother, I know this because my brother didn't live in New Jersey for 30 years, and he always had a New Jersey license plate and a New Jersey driver's license. I always was trying to figure out why, and they give an exemption since the military transfers so much. So I hope the answer is no, but to your overall question, the answer is yes.
Well, you answered my second question, which was going to be the general effect. And
Yes.
The third question I have, what other states have this process in place?
A majority of states, from what I was looking at the other day, a majority of states charge sales tax on casual sales and bringing cars into the state.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to sort of ask some and then wait and then come back?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Moving to the fiscal note, I noticed that in the legislation, for the title fee, it basically does a fiscal projection out through 2022, I think. But the fiscal note itself only looks as far out as 2015. Can you speak to the anticipated impact? Because for the first 2 fiscal years, the total impact to the state is that we would have a fiscal loss this year of $53 million, a loss next year of $36.6. We would have a little bit of an overage of $1.7 million in 2015, and then there's no additional information. Do we know, given the fiscal model, what the long-term impact of this shift would be on the fiscal impact it would have on the state?
Yes, I do, but can you tell me where you're getting the fiscal loss of $53 million?
The summary on the last page of the fiscal note.
Okay.
So the title fee itself is it shows a growth projection, but when it's read together with the other changes to our fiscal status, my question is simply, and to contextualize it, my major concern is what this does to our bond rating, both on a state level and for local governments. Because one of the reasons for ad valorem taxation is, as you know, it's considered a more stable revenue base, and the ability to project out sort of a smoothing process is helpful. So I just want to make sure I understand what we think the long-term impact of all of these pieces together will have on the state.
And the ad valorem tax, as we look back over 10 years, is very stable. It's been about $700 million, hasn't moved much above or below that. I wouldn't disagree with you on that, which is why we're guaranteeing them a 2% growth rate. I'm still looking on the fiscal note for your negative number on, when I look at title fee, it's a positive number for the state for the 3 years. So
No, I agree that it's a positive fee. So
Yes.
I'm looking at there's the specific number for title fee, but then
Right.
there's the overall impact on the state when you read it together with the rest of the substantial changes that this bill will make. So this is going outside of just the title fee number and looking at the larger implications. The fiscal note goes 2013, 2014, 2015. Right. The title fee information, however, takes into account all the way through 2022. So my question is, on any of those years, basically, do we have a fiscal projection, and we may not, do we have a fiscal projection that carries all of these changes out over the course of that period, or do we not?
Yes, we have numbers from Georgia State that go out to 2022. I would tell you a couple things about them. First off, when you start projecting what the weather is going to be on July 4th, 2022, the only thing you will know is that the number's wrong. You don't know if it's wrong high or low, but you know that the number's wrong because we're projecting 10 years out in the future. Mm-hmm. But that's not anything bad about Georgia State. That's just one thing. The fiscal note that I'm looking at that has the 10-year numbers in here, when you look at the growth rate that they have in here, has an average 4% growth rate a year on average for 13 straight years. Now, personally, I don't believe that because I've never seen a growth rate of 4% a year for 13 straight years in my life. So what I usually do is I take the Georgia State numbers and try to figure out how to be more conservative on them. But that we have fiscal notes for the state, and the net effect to the state in each year until 2020 is a positive number. And 2020 is the first year it becomes a negative number, and it's a negative of $26 million.
Okay.
In 2021, I'm negative of $68 million in those years.
And this may be a question that can be answered by the rest of the committee. My larger question, I appreciate the answer, is that we're projecting, for example, on the personal exemption for married filers, that's a number, if you look at the very last page of the revenue changes, that's a number that's going to continue to escalate. As our population grows, that exemption is going to grow. But if you look at the sort of steady state that starts to happen with the title fee, and as you pointed out, there may be a dip, my question is where those numbers intersect. And then when you take into account the remaining changes that we're making, both positive and negative, my concern is whether or not the state is essentially projecting a deficit for itself, not 3 years out, but 5 years out, and what that impact will be for the state.
Okay. If I can, the title fee portion of it we have out for 10 years. We don't have all the numbers out for 10 years because it's just, I mean, putting all the numbers out for 10 years would probably be pretty difficult to figure out. But we do have the title fee, and the reason we have the title fee for 10 years, it takes 10 years to get rid of the birthday tax. So to get rid of the birthday tax, you got to go out and figure out in year 9, 10, when it's $700 million has gone away, how do we pay for it? So that's why that projection is 10 years.
Okay. And the last question I have for now, and this again, I'm not certain if it should be directed at you or someone else on the committee, looking at the fiscal note, which does project a deficit for fiscal year 2013 of $53 million, how are we anticipating adopting or adapting our budget? The House has already passed a budget that does not take into account this $53 million deficit, and we're projecting out a deficit overall for the next 2 years. Has there been a conversation about how those dollars will be accommodated in the current budget, given the substantial cuts that we've had to make to TANF and other programs this year?
I would suggest to you that by doing an energy phase out over 4 years, by doing the ag exemption, by doing some of this construction material things. If we can bring companies to Georgia like we brought Caterpillar to Georgia, we're going to be in good stead for it, and we're not looking at cutting, we're looking at growing.
And I appreciate that. I guess the question is, the House has adopted a budget that was based on, we adopted a balanced budget. This bill, if adopted by this body and then adopted by the House, will create a deficit of $53 million. Is there a conversation or is there information about how we will amend the fiscal year 2013 budget to accommodate the immediate impact of a $53 million deficit in our budget?
I'm sorry, yes. No, there has not at this point.
Thank you.
I don't, if there has been, I'm not aware of it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, just a couple quick questions for you. I want to make sure I'm clear, make sure everybody, members of the committee too. The birthday tax, the ad valorem tax that every citizen who owns a car, every family that owns a car will get an immediate relief from this birthday tax if this bill is passed. Is that correct?
Okay, when they sell their car, you have your car today and you're going to own it for the next 5 years without selling it, you're still going to owe the birthday tax as long as you own that car.
The current car.
Their current car.
Okay.
When you go to buy your new car, and you may want to do it in the first year because I'm assuming that the sales tax rate in your county may be 7%. And if it is, in the first year, you're going to only pay 6.5%. You're going to save a half percentage point.
Okay.
But when you do that, besides a half percentage point in the first year, the day you buy that car, you're never going to have to pay that birthday tax again.
Which should save citizens and families all over the state a whole lot of money over the next several years.
The example I always come up with, a $30,000 car in Gwinnett County, unincorporated, which would be a little less expensive, is $1,600 for 5 years. If you kept your car on average for 5 years, people keep it a lot longer than that, but they only kept it for 5 years, that citizen's paying about $1,600 in birthday tax. And that birthday tax, if they buy a car today, they're going to pay a less sales tax in the first year and a less sales tax in the second year, and they're not going to have a birthday tax ever. And if they only kept it for 5 years, they save $1,600.
Okay, which is a good thing. Keeping money in people's pockets. It's a good thing. Second question for if I can. If I remember correctly, the Tax Reform Commission, one of their strongest recommendations to this committee, if not the number one, was the removal of sales tax exemption on energy. And by doing this, we fully anticipate that it would be a huge economic stimulus initiative that would continue to get folks like Caterpillar and other businesses in our state. Is that not true?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks.
On the individual level, citizens as a group are going to save over $100 million. On the business level, the businesses are going to save around $200 million, and hopefully that helps stimulate business and bring new business into Georgia. We've also done other bills, Freeport exemption, and other things that hopefully will help bring other businesses to Georgia, like Caterpillar.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any members of the committee have any further questions of Senator Balfour?
Yeah, recognize Pro Tem Williams.
Mr. Chairman, the other parts of the bill, other than, are you prepared to speak on the conservation part of the bill, or is that?
I mentioned it in general, but there's a conservation easement that right now is up to $1 million. We've reduced it to $500,000 per individual. We've also limited the transactions, transfers to one transaction, where it could have been more than one transaction.
Mr. Chairman, just as there's a lot more moving parts to this. I've talked with the governor's office about some of these issues that I have concerns about. I'll just need the time to get with, this is the first time I've seen the legislation. I need to understand it better. I need to get with the governor's lawyers to make sure that I'm comfortable with what we've agreed to. And so I'll get back to you before we meet again.
Majority Leader Rogers, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to hopefully summarize some parts of this bill. The first thing it does, or one of the main things it does, is it reduces the marriage penalty by about 2/3. The idea that we penalize people in Georgia for being married is frankly sickening on its face, but the fact that we can reduce it by 2/3 I think is a very positive aspect of this bill. The second thing, I know we often reference the elimination of the ad valorem tax on motor vehicles as eliminating the birthday tax. I think from a philosophical standpoint it actually goes one step further. It's a private property rights issue. I would love to own my own car and not have the government have a claim to it through their property tax scheme. This will eliminate their property tax scheme for my vehicle, and I think that's a very positive thing. It reinstates the sales tax holidays. I think the state's actually losing considerable money because all of our border states now have sales tax holidays. This will put Georgia back on the map for having those sales tax holidays so that our citizens that live in Georgia won't wait for the weekend to go to Florida or the weekend to go to Tennessee to purchase their items. And it also reduces those hidden taxes, those hidden input taxes on the manufacturing process, which frankly outside of the property tax are the worst type of taxes because these are taxes that are in the system but nobody sees it because it's built into the price of a good or service, which is something that we should continue to strive to eliminate. And then finally, at the very end of this process, and what matters most to me is that this is a tax cut. That the overall bill that is before us today reduces the taxes on Georgia taxpayers. Is this everything I laid out? Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Minority Leader Abrams again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually directed to the chairman. Is it possible to get a copy of the fiscal model, not just the fiscal note, but the models that were used to determine how not only how we will recompense the locals, but in general how we've modeled out the entire financial component of this?
We don't have that available right now. We will talk with the physical note preparers and try to be sure that you do have that.
Can we, if I may ask, if we can make sure, if we can get this before we vote on this bill, I would appreciate it.
And we will do our absolute best.
Thank you, sir.
The chair recognizes the Majority Leader of the House, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Balfour, first I want to tell you thank you as sincerely as I know how to say it for all your hard work on this very, very comprehensive initiative. I'm not sure it would have ever gotten to near the level of completion that it is without your incredible hard work. Two comments just for confirmation from you that I think are important that at least maybe I understand, and as I read the bill I think I reconfirmed it. As far as the conservation easement language that you were just asked about, what we reduced was the partnership cap, which was from $1 million to $500,000. The law has always been an individual $250,000, and none of that has been changed. The other major change, as I now read the bill, is that the credits after they have been received by the transferor into conservation are currently transferable indefinitely. The bill limits those credits to one transfer. As I understand it, that is the entirety of the changes that were intended to be made. I hope that's the way when everybody has a chance to look at it. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
Back to the car thing, the car tag tax, just so I understand it, just real simple terms. The tag fee replaces entirely both sales tax that we currently have and ad valorem tax that we have. It's in lieu of those. It does not add to it in any way. So a traditional buyer like me, if I'm not a casual buyer, if I go to my car dealer in 2010 13, I'll pay 6.5% where I used to pay 7% sales tax, and I will never pay 1 penny of ad valorem tax on that car for as long as I own it. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. Whether that's a new or used car that you bought at the dealership, you will pay this fee and no longer pay the birthday tax on that car ever again.
Thank you, sir.
Recognize the President Pro Tem for.
Mr. Chairman, in responding to the majority leader, there are a number of other issues, Representative, that are in the conservation, and some of these I've talked to the governor about. I just need to sit down with his attorneys to make sure I understand what they're doing. But some of the other issues are related to the state having to use a second appraiser to check on the appraiser that the applicant was using. There a fee of $5,000 being charged, and a 1% of the total value of the property of the conservation easement, which was not in the original language. We also have what qualifies. It's a little more stringent. I think I'm all right with that, but you have more qualifications for how you qualify a piece of property to put in the land, and then you have a minimum of amount of land. It can't be anything under 50 acres, and you can't subdivide it unless it's 500 acres. So those are restrictions, and there are others that I just need to get. This is the first time I've actually seen the language. There's some 2 or 3 more things. I'm going to be good. I just need to make sure I understand it and make sure the language is what the governor's office and I have talked about in the past, and I just need a little time to look at it.
We're going to give you some time to look at it.
Any further questions from members of the committee? The majority leader in the House.
I'm sorry, one more I forgot. Senator, are you aware of any proposition that's in this comprehensive bill that has not kind of been in the public domain for at least a year? Some of them, like the tag fee, for at least 4 years. I mean, are there any new issues in here that haven't sort of been covered fairly substantially over the last at least year or so that you need to point out to us?
The title fee, which is the largest one, has been around for 3 or 4 years. These other ones are things that we have been talking about for the last few months, at the very least. Most of these items have been a discussion point for the last over a year when we were looking at a bill last year. So I don't think there's anything brand new in here that you're literally seeing for the first time at all.
The minority leader, President Abrams.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can you talk about the excise tax process for local governments? Will this require a referendum, or will they be able to do it by local ordinance? What's the process by which any local government that's impacted by the exemption on manufacturing taxes would be able to put in place that tax to make up for the lost revenue? You referenced it earlier in passing that the state is going to we're going to remove the state's exemption. We will, by virtue of law, also remove the locals. The locals will have the ability to reimpose. What's the process by which that reimposition would occur?
That question's so simple, I'm going to let the House attorney answer it.
If you look on the bill around pages, let's see, 43, 44, I'm looking for it right now. Essentially, initially, the excise taxes in lieu of the sales taxes would be done by ordinance. But if the sales tax that it replaces would require a referendum to reimpose that at some point, then also the excise tax would require a referendum to reimpose that excise tax.
Okay.
Otherwise, if a referendum was not required on the sales tax that's being replaced to reimpose, then a referendum likewise would not be required.
Okay, thank you.
Recognize Majority Leader Rogers. Oh, he waves off.
Representative Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Balfour, just again to be clear, some of this stuff is pretty complex, and we've heard lots of debate about stuff, and I just want to make sure it's really clear on the e-fairness. That really, this initiative would just level the playing field for in-state retailers versus out-of-state online retailers regarding sales tax. That it is not a new tax, not an additional tax paid by consumers. That consumers now, if you go to Amazon.com and buy something online, that it's actually the obligation of the individual to pay a use tax, and so it's. I just want to make sure I understand that. It is not a new tax. It is just leveling the playing field for in-state retailers that hire citizens in our state with out-of-state retailers. Is that correct?
That is correct. If I can explain a little further, although in the fiscal note we have a $47 million impact e-fairness, that's the way it has to be scored. But the reality is, if I go into Best Buy because I want to buy a big screen TV, and I'm not just going to go online and buy it because I want to see what it is, I want to see how good it is. I go into Best Buy today, I look at all those TVs, I figure out which one I want to purchase. Then I go home after I've used their store, their employees, to figure out which one I want to purchase. And I can go online and buy for Best Buy, but if I buy from Best Buy, they've got to charge me sales tax because they have Nexus here. Because they have stores here and employees here, they've got to charge sales tax. But I can buy from Amazon and I don't have to pay sales tax. So Best Buy is competitively is disadvantaged by 7 points. But you are also 100% correct. If I bought a $1,000 big screen TV and bring it into Georgia, I currently owe use tax. I owe it now. I'm just not paying it.
So it's not a new tax, new tax on the citizens of our state in any form or fashion. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's a use tax that's owed right now, and it just turns it from uses, which is the flip side of sales tax. On other items, I'll give you examples. On cars, if you bought a car in Phoenix City, Alabama, and they didn't charge you sales tax because you were bringing it in Georgia, when you title it in Georgia, you'd owe sales tax, and you'd have to collect it. If you buy a corporate jet in North Carolina, when you bring it in Georgia, believe me, I know, you're going to owe the use tax, which is the same thing as sales tax, just the opposite end of it.
Well, I look forward to paying that when I buy my corporate jet here soon. Look forward to it.
Probably shouldn't have said that.
Majority Leader.
We don't want you to feel slighted. You can write that check today if you like. Just make it payable to Georgia Department of Revenue.
Are there further questions by members of this committee? I'm told by staff that a PDF version of this legislation is available online at both www.house.ga.gov and www.senate.ga.gov. Any further business to come before this committee? Not, we stand adjourned.